building authority requires two neutrals for a double 15-amp arc fault branch circuit breaker, conflicting with the manufacturer's instructions stating a single neutral is sufficient. Here's how to handle this situation. Firstly, contact the local electrical inspector. Request a detailed explanation of the code requirement for two neutrals on a double 15-amp arc fault branch circuit breaker. Provide the manufacturer's installation instructions demonstrating that a single neutral is compliant. Secondly, consult the National Electrical Code, or NEC. Review NEC Article 210.6 for guidance on neutral requirements for branch circuits. Determine if the local authority's interpretation of the code conflicts with the NEC. Thirdly, provide the manufacturer's documentation. Submit the manufacturer's installation instructions to the building authority. Highlight the sections specifying that a single neutral is sufficient for the double branch circuit. Fourthly, seek support from a master electrician. Hire a licensed master electrician who can provide an expert opinion on the code compliance of the installation. Request the electrician to explain the NEC requirements and support your position. Fifthly, elevate the issue to a higher authority. If necessary, escalate the issue to the Electrical Permits Board or other governing body responsible for electrical code enforcement. Provide documentation supporting your position and request a review of the code interpretation. The website address for installation instructions is Cutler Hammer, now Schneider Electric /. It is important to maintain a professional and respectful demeanor during this process. Be prepared to provide evidence and documentation to support your position. Seek legal advice if necessary to protect your rights. Now let's delve into the details of each of these suggestions. When contacting the local electrical inspector, remember that their role is to ensure safety and compliance with the electrical code. Approaching the conversation with respect and a genuine desire to understand their interpretation of the code is crucial. Ask specific questions such as, can you point me to the exact section of the code that requires two neutrals in this situation, or is there a local amendment to the NEC that mandates this? By understanding their reasoning, you can better address their concerns and present your case effectively. When referencing the manufacturer's installation instructions, pay close attention to the specific language used. Highlight any diagrams or statements that clearly indicate that a single neutral is acceptable for the double 15-amp arc fault breaker in question. Be prepared to explain how the breaker functions and why a single neutral is sufficient to carry the return current from both circuits. The NEC Article 210.6 is a key reference point. This article covers branch circuit voltage limitations and does not directly address the number of neutrals required. However, it's important to review it carefully to ensure that your installation complies with all other applicable requirements. Look for any sections that might be relevant to your situation, such as those dealing with multi-wire branch circuits or shared neutrals. Consulting with a master electrician can provide valuable insights and support. A master electrician has extensive experience interpreting and applying the electrical code, and they can offer an objective opinion on the code compliance of your installation. They can also help you prepare your case for the building authority and provide expert testimony if necessary. When seeking support from a master electrician, choose one who is familiar with arc fault breakers and the latest edition of the NEC. Explain the situation clearly and provide them with all relevant documentation, including the manufacturer's instructions and the building authority's requirements. If elevating the issue to a higher authority becomes necessary, gather all your documentation and prepare a written summary of the situation. This summary should include the following. Firstly, a clear description of the problem and the building authority's requirements. Secondly, the manufacturer's instructions and their position on the neutral wiring. Thirdly, the relevant sections of the NEC and your interpretation of them. Fourthly, any expert opinions or testimonies you have obtained. Fifthly, a proposed solution that complies with both the manufacturer's instructions and the electrical code. When presenting your case to the Electrical Permits Board or other governing body, remain calm and professional. Present your evidence clearly and concisely, and be prepared to answer any questions they may have. Remember that the goal is to ensure safety and compliance with the electrical code, so focus on demonstrating that your installation meets these requirements. In addition to these suggestions, it's also important to understand the technical aspects of arc fault breakers and neutral wiring. An arc fault breaker is designed to detect dangerous electrical arcs in a circuit and interrupt the flow of current before a fire can start. These breakers work by monitoring the current waveform and looking for patterns that are characteristic of arcing faults. A double 15-amp arc fault breaker is essentially two 15-amp breakers in a single unit. Each breaker protects a separate circuit, but they share a common trip mechanism. This means that if an arc fault is detected on either circuit, both breakers will trip, disconnecting power to both circuits. A neutral wire is a conductor that carries the return current from a circuit back to the source. In a typical 120 volt circuit, the neutral wire is connected to ground at the service panel, providing a path for fault current to flow back to the source in the event of a ground fault. In a multi-wire branch circuit, two or more ungrounded conductors share a common neutral conductor. This can save on wiring costs and reduce the number of conductors required. However, it's important to ensure that the neutral conductor is properly sized to carry the total current from all the circuits it serves. The NEC specifies the minimum size requirements for neutral conductors in multi-wire branch circuits. In the case of a double 15-amp arc fault breaker, the manufacturer's instructions typically specify that a single neutral conductor is sufficient to carry the return current from both circuits. This is because the two circuits are protected by the same breaker, and if an arc fault occurs on one circuit, both circuits will be disconnected. However, the building authority may have concerns about the potential for overloading the neutral conductor if both circuits are fully loaded simultaneously. To address these concerns, you can provide calculations showing that the neutral conductor is properly sized to carry the maximum expected current from both circuits. You can also explain that the arc fault breaker will trip if an overload occurs, preventing damage to the wiring. In some cases, the building authority may require you to install a separate neutral conductor for each circuit, even if the manufacturer's instructions allow for a shared neutral. If this is the case, you may need to comply with their requirements to obtain approval for your installation. However, you can still argue your case by presenting the manufacturer's instructions and explaining the technical reasons why a shared neutral is sufficient. Ultimately, the goal is to reach a mutually agreeable solution that ensures the safety and compliance of your electrical installation. Remember to maintain a professional and respectful demeanor throughout the process, and be prepared to provide evidence and documentation to support your position. By understanding the electrical code, the manufacturer's instructions, and the technical aspects of arc fault breakers and neutral wiring, you can effectively address any concerns raised by the building authority and ensure that your installation is safe and compliant. If you are unsure of any of these steps, it is best to contact a professional such as an electrical engineer. Electrical engineers, especially those with power engineering experience, will be able to review and explain the situation thoroughly, while also providing expert advice. They are very familiar with the NEC and its applications. Moreover, they can act as a liaison to the electrical inspector, building authority or permit office and communicate effectively on your behalf. Many will also provide official stamped documentation proving the legitimacy of your electrical design. They will be able to make power calculations and size conductors appropriately based on a variety of factors. They can also help determine if there are any violations from their expert point of view. Remember that electrical engineering is a regulated profession, and in most jurisdictions, these people must be professionally licensed in order to provide those services legally. It is also a good idea to ask your insurance company about your situation, as it may have specific requirements about electrical work done. Some insurance companies may insist that they be notified or that they approve the electrical design prior to the installation. As a last resort, if all other attempts fail, and you strongly believe that the correct solution is not being implemented, it might be time to involve legal counsel. A good lawyer in this field will know the applicable state and local laws, and will be able to ensure that your rights are protected. Please do not perform any electrical work that you are not trained or familiar with. Electrical work can be very dangerous and may even cause death. The electrical work must be completed by licensed professionals. They are also required to be insured to protect you from liabilities and risks. These trained professionals will also be up to date with the most recent electrical code and be able to help solve complex electrical issues. They also can provide documentation and permits if necessary. They will also know about electrical safety to ensure that you and the people around you will be safe.